feel like Charlotte and I are sisters, actually, because you talk about the three P's, Charlotte, and we talk about the three C's at Saga. So really interesting to hear what you had to say. And yes, the first two guys gave you all the scary stuff, and I think we're going to talk you through all the positive stuff, hopefully, and how to engage this powerhouse group that we are. So I want to say good afternoon, everyone, but hello, whatever time zone you're listening in. It's an absolute delight to be here. My name's Lisa Edgar. I'm the Chief Exec of Saga's wholly owned insight unit, the Big Window. So seeking to drive a health and wellbeing agenda that is capable of bringing positive change in our respective countries and across the world. That is what we're here for, and I really hope that I kind of take you through some of that. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we at Saga and the Big Window think about health and wellbeing through the lens of ageing. And tomorrow I'm going to introduce how this became the foundation of our proposition development with Gillian Monaghan, our brilliant Chief Exec of Saga Spaces, what we learn and what this means for the UN and driving a sustainable model of health and wellbeing. So let's see if this works for me. That is a very good start. So let me start with a question then. How many of us here, I did say I was going to be positive, but how many of us here would like to know we currently had a serious illness or condition? So I'll just let you kind of, yeah, interesting, probably about 6 in 10. So replicating a study by the great Cass Sunstein with Tali Sharrow, we asked this of a representative sample of 50 plus consumers in the UK, and the answer, 4 in 10 did not want to know this information. So it's quite interesting. Further, a significant minority would actively pay to avoid hearing this information. So quite incredible. And I'll return to the drivers for this shortly. But my point here is that whatever we consider in relation to health and well-being, if we're not careful, it will just be met with resistance at the individual level. So I think we have and will continue to recognise today and tomorrow that health and well-being is a problem to solve for, and hence it being the third of the UN sustainability goals. But like Charlotte, we think it's an opportunity, and we have to consider why. We need to remember, though, that solutions to macro problems are simply the summation of individual outcomes. They mean nought, in Yorkshire saying, unless we as individuals kind of take them up. This is where the rubber hits the road, you know. Individuals, and particularly older individuals, do not always recognise or indeed accept their own health issues or their impacts. The UK Financial Services Regulatory Body, the FCA, runs what it calls, absolutely amazing, a financial life study every few years. It interviews a huge and representative sample of the UK population about many of the aspects of their lives as they pertain to finance and financial management. As part of this, it ascertains characteristics of vulnerability among the population, including health status, and provides a measure as to whether or not someone's vulnerable as a function of their health. Interestingly, only 23%, that is less than 1 in 4, for all you mathematicians out there, I don't know why I need to tell you that, of those deemed by their characteristics to have a health issue, considered that health issue to impact on their daily lives, less than 1 in 4. And more interestingly, from my view, that disinclination to think it impacted their life actually increases with age. So the older you are, the less likely you are to think your health issue impacts on your daily life. And 2 years ago, my insight unit, the Big Window, recruited over 60 people to the FCA definition of who would be vulnerable. We interviewed them each individually in their own homes for a couple of hours. Only 14 of that 60-odd total sample considered themselves vulnerable or limited in their lives. Funnily enough, That was 23% of our sample. I do like some consistent validity. So my point here is that people relate to health as they age differently. We must understand this if we're to support the successful engagement with healthy interventions. So the key and a theme that our content analysis amplified was that aging, as Charlotte was saying, happens to us every single day, every minute of every day. Guess what? We become good at it. We become practiced at it, and we get used to the changes that occur as a result. Those changes are iterative, and we do not see them as impacting us in the same way as perhaps when we were younger. And so the young are more affected, really, if something happens to them from a health perspective. It impacts them more. It makes sense when you think about it. So we also saw a clear need to reframe and normalize circumstances. We believe that this was at least in part related to what Laura Carstensen in her great SST theory describes as horizon-led behaviors as we approach life's later stages. It's a demonstration of positive affect. We also see a strong and increasing need to retain self-worth, purpose, meaning into later in life. Our older adults were very conscious about being seen as a burden. They didn't want to feel dependent on others. There is a pride and worth in independence. Sound familiar? We know from the work by Levy, which I'll return to again shortly, that positive framing is so important in later life. We can see that older adults instinctively know this and are striving to attain it. Older adults can externalize problems. It helps them, is that it's their adaptation. Repaint issues as something to do with the system, because it often is actually. Aging brings with it this need to reframe. People instinctively know that's the route to success. Make something more positive. So that said, I'm just going to come back to this chart again, because that said, the desire to reframe into the positive is set against a nagging doubt as people get older. That doubt sits below the surface and typically resurfaces when older people have to deal with the outside world. That's what we found in those hours and hours that we spent in people's homes. For example, they got agitated or more nervous when they needed to speak to a contact centre or go into a retail environment. Here, older adults told us that in advance of that scenario, they would imagine what the branch assistant or what the contact centre advisor will think of them. Will they consider me as slower, lower, more likely to say no, less cognizant, less able to articulate my needs? And it was this doubt, therefore, that was spawning the problem, not necessarily a clean read of their own abilities. It was the projection of what others would think of them. So as we saw in this extensive and in-depth research program, older people desire to see their remainder of their lives as positive, exactly as you were saying, Charlotte. Positive, active, pleasurable, with purpose and meaning. They also, in tandem, become more sensitized to how they're seen by others. This, in fact, starts to erode their self-perception, and ultimately they can give into this, and this is where the anxiety kind of really sets in. And as Levy's work suggests, these anxieties and beliefs impact health outcomes directly. So there's a lesson here for us over the next couple of days and for the UN and its sustainability goals at large. If we only ever see aging through the lens of health or indeed vulnerability, we will get what we asked for. We need to solve for the problems that individuals themselves want to focus on. Then I really believe we'll get the macro solutions that we're looking for. That's the way up we need to go. So the problems that older adults and indeed consumers want to solve for at Saga, we come from a consumer lens, and I think in many ways that commercial imperative is an advantage for us. You know, we've been talking about increasing lifespan for a long time, and this is at least partly the reason we're here to talk about health and well-being within the context of aging and global sustainability. We know that an aging population, partly driven by rising life expectancy, is something for economies to adapt to. And we have gone on to talk about healthy life expectancy or health span. Let's focus on the gap between life expectancy and healthy life expectancy, as we've seen before. One, as we know, not rising at quite the same pace as the other in many countries, and that's under the microscope as an issue. But is this enough? Do people simply want to be healthier for longer? And what does that really mean? Because if it really just means an absence of the negative, i.e. a lower drain on health provision, then it really isn't enough. The consumers we speak to week in, week out, you know, we've got a 20,000 strong consumer panel at Saga that are happy to tell us what they think all of the time. They want more than a healthy existence. Guess what they want? A purposeful life with meaning. And as the boom generation and behind them the Gen Xers make their way through to later life, they bring with them a set of expectations, an expectation to be of value to society, to contribute, to be fulfilled. This eudaimonic sense of well-being must be part of our equation. Whether in this more affluent setting here on this picture, or simply an older, more sagacious woman passing on knowledge in any society or circumstance. So I talked about saying we have the 3 C's to your 3 P's. We believe in our data and insight tells us that a fuller, healthier, older life is dependent on 3 C's. Confidence. What is the belief in older age health? What drives that and what are the implications? Connection, the need, but the power of affiliation and belonging. And contribution, the need for purpose, value, self-worth. It is these 3 C's that Saga has built its purpose and vision around. And it's these 3 C's that we believe make for a positive change in older society and the UK and hopefully across the world. So let me take you through them and hopefully give you a slightly different angle on them. So I want to illustrate with the question that I started with when I stood up here. How many of us would want to know if we had a serious illness? And the majority would, but a significant minority, as we saw, wouldn't. We found this same disinclination to know, engage with key health and indeed financial information. The two are very, very closely linked across the UK population, as did indeed Sunstein and Sharrow in their studies. However, what really struck was the relationship with age. As people got older, they are decreasingly likely to want to know a whole range of health and financial well-being information, even including the current status of their health, or indeed whether they have enough money to last them through their retirement. In fact, we asked this representative sample of the UK population about their willingness to engage in 17 different aspects of their health and financial well-being. All, there's just 3 up here, but all showed a very similar relationship with age. So the question then is why? The why lies in the work, we believe, done by Sunstein and Sharrow, who found that the willingness to engage with information, be it about health, be it about what's good for you, be it about your financial future, was a net of 3 evaluations. And the first 2 I'm going to really focus on here. The first is utility, up here in the purple. Essentially, this describes the decision or the value placed on processing information, processing key health information as a result of whether we expect it will do us any good or not. In other words, whether it will bring us rational benefit. For example, it'll do me good, really, to know whether I'm prone to a serious condition or whether I have one, because then I might be able to ameliorate for it. do something about it. In turn, of course, that will then bring me a rational benefit. I might live for longer, feel better, prevent decline. This, of course, is where most health campaigns start, don't they? We're going to try and persuade you as an individual to engage in this, to do X or to do Y, because we believe it will do you good. It's much of our kind of conversation. So I want to draw your attention to that in orange, affect. The second aspect of evaluation. This is really the piece that I've been interested in for some time now, and honestly was delighted to see Cass and Tali articulate it so well. This is the part of the decision to engage or not based on knowing whether, or thinking whether knowing that information will make us feel good. Will I process that health campaign if I think that really digesting it is going to make me feel anxious, make me feel it's too late? Well, maybe I just won't. In other words, we expect simply knowing information to make us feel positive or negative. So it is a projection of our likely affective reaction to knowledge. Myself and my team at the Big Window felt this to be so significant. We think emotional projection is very, very powerful enabler, but more often a blocker to processing what institutions, governments, providers wants to say to citizens and consumers alike. We feel not enough attention is paid to these communications and programs, whether on the health or the financial side of well-being. And further, we believe this to be a significant marker for confidence, particularly for older adults. We see in our work that older adults do not believe they have agency in their own health because they believe the decline is so pervasive and inevitable, given all of the information that surrounds them, exactly what we've been saying before. So for that very reason, they are avoiding engagement that could be good for them because they don't have the confidence in their underlying health status or ability to counter it. They believe there's only further bad news to come. And further, the need to hear positive news as we near later life is so overwhelming that we over-risk information to the extent that we don't process it, just in case it's bad news. So tying all of the work of people like Sunstein, Levy, Carstensen and others together tells us that belief, confidence, positive affect is essential for engagement in health and well-being and will only get more so over time. Happy to talk to the last element over the break, but I am aware that I want to get you to a coffee sometime soon. So the second of the two C's, connection, that Charlotte alluded to, and I defer to the brilliant work here, so eloquently articulated by Robert Wardinger and his team at Harvard. People you connect with, either on a daily level, out of the blue, or through meaningful relationships you have at work with friends and your loved ones, lengthens both body and brain life. What I am saying today, though, is that connections, relationships are not just essential for health and well-being in and of itself, but they are a pivotal change agent. Harnessing the role of others has to be central to our health strategies, to making them more sustainable, in fact. They make health start, but they also make it stick, and that is really key. So we've recently, in 2023, conducted with our partners in Ideation Antidote an extensive multi-stage project looking at the needs of older adults and where those needs might be fulfilled by health and wellbeing age tech solutions. As they plotted health and wellbeing needs through our age groups from 50 to 90 years of age, the team was struck by the impact of relationships. Lack of connection amplified fear of health, but also reduced the inclination to engage in it. We saw in this ideation program that connection itself is subject to a whole number of variables. So let me pause and use this slide to illustrate two of those life stage triggers and women as trialists, and indeed women as key variables. I mean, I just love the fact that women really can make things happen. And let me tell you, in consumer worlds, men tend to follow them. The women are the key trialists. So we've seen in so many of our other research projects that we've conducted, life triggers, and in particular, the shift from full-time work to retirement, a subject that I'll come back to when you have to listen to me again in the morning, makes for a key moment, a pivot around which new connections, friendships, tribes are born. We must recognise these life-changing moments when seeking to maximise health engagement opportunities. I'm going to return to gender again tomorrow, so I won't do it too much here, but in brief, women are those trialists. They are the people that we can see are happy to trial new friendships, looking for people who reflect the flourishing versions of themselves post-family life, post-career. They kind of discover a new sense of themselves in older lives, and they're happy to look for people to do it with them. So what we see with women is that they look for wing women. You know, where we might have wing men, the women look for wing women, and we can see that in all of the product development that we're doing. So Jo Coughlin, of course, is right. Women are the chief consumption officers of the household. We also found them to be the chief innovation officers too, because the men tend to follow. So my final C is contribution. We started looking at this within the big window and at Saga because we wanted to reframe the conversation on aging, which honestly is an important brand issue for Saga too. From something that's the butt of jokes, typically depicted on the front of birthday cards. I don't know about here in the US, but you go into any birthday card store in the US, it's full of, kind of side jokes about getting older. And we wanted to change that to age being something that's universally respected. So we started by looking at dispelling the myths about older people. Myths that I know exist not just in the UK, but everywhere. You know, older people are ambitionless, aren't they? They are dependent, and they love being dependent. They love being grumpy. They're a drain on society, financially and psychologically. Do you know, that's just bull. It's not true. Having worked with older people for over 20 years, I just knew it. I also knew, harking back to my point earlier about vulnerability labeling, that these myths are holding people back from being their best. They are, in essence, self-fulfilling. So I set about dispelling them, starting with countering the idea that older people are a drain. It's the most prevalent conversation in the UK at the moment, particularly with the politics as they are. So back to the C for contribution then. In a study of over 2,000 adults, 4 in 10 said that having a sense of purpose in life was of the utmost importance, 9 or 10 out of 10. Almost half said the same for having something to look forward to, and over a third for actively helping and supporting others. In fact, each of these three either held up or they increased as you went through the decades towards 90. So they become more, not less important as you age. And I've conducted, dare I say it, over 1,000 focus groups in my Insight days personally. And I typically start by saying to people, tell me about yourself, what do you do in your spare time? And you know what they say? Oh, I volunteer. So clearly I say to them, well, what do you volunteer in? And they say, I help older people, say the 78-year-olds and 85-year-olds. I help older people. So they take them to hospital appointments, they help them go to church, they go to the market to do their shopping for them. This is a group that wants to help a category that they themselves don't believe they belong to. There is a value lesson therein, isn't there? So here we go, contribution. We decided to actually measure it, to prove it for you. You can see here the numbers in orange are for the over 50s in the UK. I apologise for the fact these numbers are probably minuscule compared to the US, but in purple, they are the numbers for the over 65s. So far from being a drain on society financially, we abstracted all of the costs of older people over 50 and over 65 from the value of the benefit they bring in grandparenting, in supporting the community, in their charity work, in caring for others. We abstracted the pension cost, the social health care cost, even their TV license discount costs, and so on. From that number, their contribution, even over 65, is net positive to the economy. And please believe me, we only used the living wage. We somehow didn't inflate the value. So back to the 3 C's, I really want to emphasize them. Well, we can say they can be the 3 C's or the 3 P's, but the point is the same: confidence, connection, and contribution. I'm going to leave you with a bridge for this chart about making health stick, and really making the point that I'll come back to tomorrow with Gillian's piece. We really must start engaging with consumers and seeing the world through their eyes. This is the key. See their needs to fulfill, not our macro problems to solve. Then we can summate those individual outcomes to provide macro solutions. Part of doing that is understanding our engagement strategies, who, when, how, but part of it is also seeing more than lifespan, health span, and walking our impact evaluation into full span. How can we really get to the point where people want to live an older life because it gets better and better? Thank you.